Hey everybody, welcome back to A Matter of Life and Maiden, the podcast of the Beast. I am Joe Labriola, and today I want to title this segment My Life and Maiden. And what I want to do today is just go back through the studio albums. I'm going to rank them from my least favorite to my most favorite, or the weakest to the strongest in my opinion. This isn't a definitive ranking, this is my personal ranking. But while I do that, I want to add that My Life and Maiden piece to it and talk about my experiences with every album. And I can remember where I was every time I heard them for the first time, or some memories I had with the songs from the records. And I'm probably going to sprinkle in just a little bit of history about where I come from, a little bit of me doing some rough covers with some of the songs from most of the albums that I have on file on hand. I want to start off with talking about me in general. I grew up in a town in Pennsylvania called Altoona, Pennsylvania. It's an old railroad town. Once the railroad kind of got out of the city in the 90s when I was a kid, really with the advent of the interstate, we didn't really see the diminishing of the railroad until the 90s, early 2000s, and up to the present. Now Altoona is more of like a retail, restaurant, truck stop location where there's retail and restaurants and food service. That's what the city primarily is run on, like business wise. But back in the day, there were some big corporations here. You know, my dad used to work for a big corporation. I had relatives and friends and family friends who worked for several corporations and businesses that used to be here, but with businesses moving out of the country to other places, this is one of those kind of ghost towns, quote unquote. There's stuff to do, but if it's not restaurant or retail, good luck. So that's kind of where I come from. But as a kid, and when I was getting into Maiden growing up, there was still a lot of stuff to do. There were video stores, there were toy stores, there were arcades. There was a lot of stuff open for, a teenager in my late teens, 17, 18, 19 years old, to go around and do with my friends. And I'm going to talk about some of the people I grew up with in here as well. Obviously, Matt, we created the podcast together, but talk about some other people too and just some experiences. But the one thing with Maiden that really, really helped me get into them a lot was I went to Penn State Altoona. And at Penn State Altoona, I studied history. That was my major. And then I went on to grad school and got my master's degree in history and public history at Indiana University of Pennsylvania. And I'm now actually a historian. I teach history at that campus now, actively. So going through that trajectory and knowing Maiden and having Maiden in my life, I mean, really to a certain way contributed to me wanting to explore certain things that they sing about in their songs and their discography. So for me, it's a huge thing. I've always loved fantasy and science fiction too. Matt and I have spoke about that on the podcast extensively. We both grew up loving those things. We're both historians. Matt has a history major too. I'm a college professor. I teach it. And I dabble in law as well. So they really, really set me on a path to get to the place where I am today. So with that aside, I'm going to just dive into my weakest album, or the one that I think is the weakest, my least favorite album. And that for me, coming in at number 17, is No Prayer for the Dying. I give this record a 3 out of 10. Now, experience-wise with it, the My Life and Maiden piece, I can remember looking at the artwork and being like, what is this? Because I had been a huge 80s fan and a Reunion fan for a super long time, and you're going to see when I talk about those albums down the road here in this podcast. But No Prayer for the Dying for me was just not that great. There was a time where I really tried to get into it. Most Maiden fans, if you're a Maiden fan, you kind of go through the discography and you latch on to albums and you listen to them for, a period of time, whether that be a week, 2 weeks, a month, 6 months, a year, and beyond. No Prayer was one of those albums I actually did latch on to for a couple months. Um, Growing up, Matt Wagner, the co-creator and the co-host of this podcast, his first name is Matt. We had another friend named Matt who we hung out with, and my brother's name is Matt. So there were three Matts. So my friend, whose name was Matt, my other friend, who I grew up with, who I met in junior high school, he was really rocking To Bring Your Daughter to the Slaughter. He was really digging that tune. So him and I would listen to that constantly. And he really liked it. He really liked Bring Your Daughter to the Slaughter. And he dug the songs Holy Smoke. So there was a time there where I was listening to those songs. I mean, they weren't my favorite, but he was trying to get me to listen to what he liked. And for a while there, I really did dig Bring Your Daughter to the Slaughter. I will say that. Matt and I had some fun experiences with this record, just making fun of it, making fun of the title track, and just making up verses and chorus lines. But, the first time I heard this record was probably like 2009, 2010, something like that, where I actually wanted to dive into it. Not the first time I heard it, excuse me. I'd listened to it before then, but I couldn't get into it. The first time I actually tried to sit down and digest it and get into it was like 2009, 2010. Because I've been listening to all the other stuff, which was way better, right? And that's when my friend would put the Bring Your Daughter to the Slaughter on and Holy Smoke, and we try to get into it. And there's some decent moments in it, but listening to it with Matt Wagner too, I mean, just having that Run Silent, Run Deep, I mean, we really got into it that way. We're trying to pick the stuff out when him and I would sit around and like rank every song. So this album was really not something that I gravitated towards at all, besides those couple corny moments and a little bit of fun I had with it and a little bit of trying to appreciate it for what it is. But still, it's a 3 out of 10. I did dabble and put down a little bit of a rough cover of No Prayer, which you'll see here.
Times when I've wondered, times when I've cried, when my prayers they were answered, at times when I've lied. And if you ask me a question, would I tell you the truth? Now there's something to bet on. You've got nothing to lose, yeah.
But with that aside, as far as the album goes, it's nothing that I was like, oh man, this album changed my life. It was great. It's an amazing record. I was never that into it. The artwork wasn't that great. It was, Derek Riggs, probably some of the weakest art he's done for the band. Whether you have the original with him grabbing the grave robber by the throat, or the one where they took it out and edited it out, and it's just Eddie, and they changed his eyes a little bit, his eye color from the lightning to like the reddish, the red glow. I don't know. It's their worst album. And you had Bruce Dickinson, and they churned out songs like Tell Gunner and Public Enema #1 and all that stuff. I can't get behind it. But I did have a moment with it. Moving on to number 16, Fear of the Dark. I give this record a 5 out of 10. Now, I did have some moments with Fear of the Dark, and some of those moments were like listening to live stuff, listening to like a real live Dead One, and Live at Donington. I actually have a Live at Donington t-shirt too, with the like winged Eddie over the top of it. And I do believe Mark Wilkinson did that cover art. I think he did that Live at Donington cover art, Best of the B-Sides, and he's the guy who just recently did, Book of Souls and Senjutsu cover art. So he has done some stuff with the band in the past and, modern day. He's just like their guy right now. But the album itself, the cover art I loved. I thought it was really cool, really unique. Eddie coming out of the tree like a vampiric monster thing. I thought that was neat. But as far as the record itself is concerned, I never really got that into it, because when I listened to the album, like version of the title track, Fear of the Dark, it was okay, but the live versions were so much better, like on a real live Dead One or Live at Donington, and they were just far superior. So every time I listened to the album version, I was like, yeah, it's okay, it's good, but the live version is way better. But Fear of the Dark actually was one of the first songs that I tried to learn how to play on electric guitar after The Wicker Man, first Iron Maiden songs. One of the first songs too. And I can remember playing the beginning part like dan dan na 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 na. I remember Matt getting frustrated with me because I kept messing it up. But I eventually got it down and started playing it, and just did some variations and covers, just playing different melodies and chord progressions and simplifying things and doing things in a different way, a more rhythmic way. But yeah, I did a cover of Fear of the Dark, and here it is. Check it out.
Sometimes feel a little strange, a little anxious when it's dark. Fear of the dark, fear of the dark. I have a constant fear that something's always near. Fear of the dark.
But with that being said, this record too, right about the same time, I was kind of getting into '90s stuff more. After I had worn out, like I said, reunion stuff and '80s stuff, trying to give this record a chance, and I just really couldn't get into it. Be Quicker, Be Dead, I liked. Half the record I liked. But I remember getting Visions of the Beast, that like DVD that came out in like 2002 or something like that, 2001. And it had like a bunch of their music videos, and it had like Wasting Love on it, and I think Fear of the Dark's on there, and Afraid to Shoot Strangers is on it. I think Blaze, they reissued the video with Blaze singing the vocals on it. But I mean, really cool way to get into Fear of the Dark, and that Visions of the Beast DVD music video compilation, it's actually really cool. If you want to see like concert footage and hear some stuff, it was really neat, and see their old music videos and things. That really helped me get into this older stuff too, like the stuff that was like not well known, the obscure stuff, the albums that like people didn't gravitate to. Because when you're getting into a band, you want to find something different. You want to find something unique that not everybody likes. So that's what I was trying to do. But I still, even trying to grasp at straws here with Fear of the Dark, I could never really get into it the way that other people have. I think it's their most overrated album. When I went to go see the Final Frontier North American tour in 2010 with Matt Wagner, and our other friend and my brother, he bought a Fear of the Dark shirt at Hot Topic, and it was one of those decorative ones that had like the stuff on the back and the front, and it was like an orangish reddish color with Eddie coming out of the tree on the front, and it was like the same design on the back. And I remember we were walking through the parking lot to go into the show, and this guy comes up to my brother on the Final Frontier North American tour, and he's like, "Hey, cousin, how much for the shirt? It's amazing. I never saw something like that." He's like, "I'll give you $100 for it right now." My brother's like, "Should I give him my shirt?" I'm like, "Nah, man, it's up to you." I was like, "You keep it. You do whatever you need to." I said, "You can buy a shirt in here if you want to go around shirtless." He's like, "Nah, I'll keep it." But that was a highlight, just with Fear of the Dark, and shirts and things like that, and merch and all the stuff that we had. Really cool Eddie. I mean, he is one of the coolest Eddies. I'll give him that. That's a really cool Eddie that Melvin Grant drew for that, and he is an iconic Eddie for sure. But that's my experience with Fear of the Dark. The live stuff was way more interesting to me than the album stuff, and that's why they only really play one song from the record. And to go back to No Prayer and echo this, because I really didn't say it, they don't play anything from No Prayer because they know it's not that good. If it was that good, they would have like at least one song in their set list every time they play, and at least they have Fear of the Dark in their set list. It's usually always in there, so they are proud of that song, and it is a good song, and it's catchy, and the art is great. So for that, I give them credit. Number 15, Virtual 11. I'm giving this record a 6 out of 10. For the longest time, I was naive, and I never really looked at Virtual 11. I kind of ignored it. I listened to a couple of songs, and I just automatically assumed it was the worst record. I was kind of one of those people who was like, yeah, Blaze should have never been in the band. Worst singer ever. He's never going to be Bruce. And I didn't give this record or X Factor a chance. I was kind of in that camp that Bruce is the best, and then Paul, and then I don't even want to listen to Blaze stuff. When I first got into Maiden, that's how I was. But then, like I said, after you experiment and you start dabbling and you start looking through the stuff, these like 90s records, all kind of around the same time, I gravitated towards them a little bit later on. I got into them like 2007, 2008, 2009, more like 2007, 2009. Because 2008, I was on a high of Somewhere Back in Time and like Live After Death. Like, I was obsessed with that record. So I wasn't even thinking about 90s stuff at that point in time. So I got into it a little bit in '07, some of the Blaze stuff, especially X Factor. Not so much Virtual 11, but more X Factor. And then like '09, like latter '08 and '09, I was kind of digging into some stuff that I had overlooked and glossed over just to give it a chance. And that's kind of where I got into these records. So Virtual 11 for me, even back then, I remember just putting it on and listening to it, and I was like, man, this is not good. I do not like it. I remember making fun of Angel and the Gambler with Wagner, Matt, and it was just, we just made fun of the record. We couldn't find a redeeming quality on it. We did love the Klansman performance with Bruce on Rock and Rio, which we'll talk about in a minute, down the road here. But other than that, I couldn't get into the record. I did like Future Real. I really thought that was a cool opener, and I really dug the artwork that Derek Riggs submitted, like the extended art for it, not the actual art that they used for the single, like the whatever it was, some like Virtual 11 Eddie head with his eyes. It was dumb, but the one that kind of looked like Power Slave, but in the future, it looked like a power station in the future that Derek Riggs drew, that was really cool. I liked that a lot. It reminded me of like Somewhere in Time mixed with Power Slave. I thought it was neat. I remember looking at that artwork and being like, man, this is awesome. Why didn't they use this? But outside of that, this is actually a record that's grown on me in my later years as opposed to when I first got into Maiden. Like I said, I give it a 6 out of 10. I'm putting it above Fear of the Dark and No Prayer for the Dying. I think it's just a better record. By no means is it excellent. I mean, it's a very flawed album. But for what Blaze was doing and what he tried to do, and they tried to make this like Blaze's quote-unquote Somewhere in Time, a futuristic album with Blaze, he did pretty good. I give him credit. Like, I do like Lightning Strikes Twice. I do like Como Estas Amigos. I do like The Klansman. I really have come to appreciate Educated Fool. I mean, and I'll show you a cover of that song here and a cover of The Klansman. Check these out.
It's a right to believe, we need to be free. It's a time when you die and without asking why can't you see what they do? The right is down, taking on land that belongs to the clans alone. In the dream, just want to be free. Need to belong. I am a glad.
This record is one that's grown on me, and I think it's pretty okay. It's not amazing, but it's pretty good. For the longest time, it was just something I made fun of. I did think the artwork was pretty cool. I did like the way Eddie looked. I liked the virtual reality thing because I was a gamer growing up. Grew up playing Nintendo like my entire life. NES, Super Nintendo, N64, GameCube, Wii, all that stuff. And Xbox and PlayStation mixed in there too. But my foundation in gaming was Nintendo. And I remember when I saw the Virtual 11 cover, Nintendo had this product called a Virtual Boy. And I remember I had one. My brother and I both got one, and it was just red. We would sit there and play, and like the screen was red. You put your head in like this headset that was on a stand, and you'd sit in a chair, put your head in this headset, and look into it, and it was kind of like a viewfinder almost, but it was like red virtual. And I played the crap out of it. I think I love the Virtual Boy. It was a neat thing, and I guess later they were giving people headaches and stuff like that. But I can remember seeing this cover and being like, man, that reminds me of playing my Virtual Boy back in the day. So I do have a little bit of appreciation for the cover. It has something to do with like a soccer reference, or the Europeans would call it a football reference. So Melvin Grant on this cover again, and he did a pretty good job. I do dig it. I think it's cool. It's not super amazing, but it's decent. It has that really cool Maiden artsy feel to it. So I like it a lot. But other than that, nothing really that spectacular about Virtual 11. Some people dove into it. I remember I used to be on this forum on Facebook. Matt and I had a group on Facebook dedicated to Eddie from Iron Maiden, and people were posting about Virtual 11, how it was their favorite album, and and I would look at each other and be like, "What are these people talking about? How?" But I can just remember those unique experiences I had with it, and I think it was I think it was cool. I think it was cool that way. So I really I really did like some of the stuff on here later in life, but when I was younger, not so much. Not so much. I want to say this too, and I guess I failed to mention this previously at the beginning of this podcast, but every one of these albums I'm going to talk about, I had some weird, unique experience with. There's something about them that I found interesting, and that's why Maiden's my favorite band. Even the stuff that I really don't think is that great, I can still find something in it. I can still find like a diamond in the rough or like a hidden gem. So that's why this band is so awesome. But anyway, not to go off on a tangent there, which I did a little bit. After Virtual 11, which I gave a 6 out of 10, number 14 is The X Factor. And I'm giving this a 7 out of 10. The X Factor. The experience I had with this, and I kind of talked about this on a previous podcast, Matt was really into the Sign of the Cross, the song, and I remember him and I going to a King's Family restaurant, getting chicken tenders and potato wedges, and talking about Sign of the Cross, and talking about how much of a great song it is, and why it's so epic. And I remember listening to it for the first time, being like, you know what, it is actually really awesome. It's totally killer. And I remember then watching Rock in Rio with Matt and seeing it live, probably in like 2007 or so. And then Matt bought me a copy of Rock in Rio that year for my birthday a couple months later, and I had the copy with Bruce singing Sign of the Cross live, and in the album version of Rock in Rio, you can hear the guy screaming because I guess something happened with the cross. They had the prop cross and it fell and broke his arm or something. But really cool song. To this day, it's pretty amazing. It's actually one of my top Steve Harris solo pen written epics, right? It's an amazing song, and getting to see it live 3 times now, because I saw the Legacy of the Beast tour 3 times. It was awesome. The X Factor album itself, though, for me, it was never really one of my favorites. There wasn't really a time where I was like, hey, I'm really into this record. A part that really hits me is when A Matter of Life and Death came out in 2006, and I was trying to find something similar and something dark. And there are a lot of songs on here that I honestly will argue that 10 years later, when A Matter of Life and Death came out 11 years after this record, a lot of the songs would fit on A Matter of Life and Death. I mean, Sign of the Cross is one of them. A Matter of Life and Death is about war and religion, right? And what better song than Sign of the Cross to fit on there? Lord of the Flies, Edge of Darkness, Blood on the World's Hands, those kind of songs, Fortunes of War. The list goes on. I mean, it's a really dark, foreboding, atmospheric record, and I came to appreciate it more after hearing A Matter of Life and Death. It's almost like you take the themes from X Factor and then give them to Bruce and this new 6-piece band, and what they churn out is a matter of life and death. It's a better version of the X Factor. It's a better, more polished, just better, well-rounded version of the X Factor. And I'm saying this in hindsight because I had a matter of life and death before the X Factor, because I became a fan in like 2004, 2005. For me, the X Factor was always an album where I was like, man, there's some really good stuff on here. If only Bruce was in the band, right? You're like, if only Bruce was in the band in the 1990s for these records, for X Factor and Virtual 11, it could have been a hell of a lot better. But everything happens for a reason, and I give Blaze all the credit. I think he did a really good job, in particular on the X Factor. The X Factor is a way better record than Virtual 11, and there's some really tasty stuff on there. Some classics: Lord of the Flies, Sign of the Cross, like I said, Blood in the World's Hands in particular. Those three are just amazing. And I did do a little cover of Sign of the Cross here. This record for me was never something where I was like, man, I can't wait to hear songs from the X Factor. I always went back, like I said, to Rock and Rio with Bruce singing it, and comparing it to the dark and foreboding atmosphere that the band did on A Matter of Life and Death. So, memories with this, not many, besides Legacy of the Beast, like I said, seeing that song, and then just kind of talking about Sign of the Cross itself. Another thing, actually, before I forget, another memory. Matt and I went and got the movie Falling Down with Michael Douglas, and it's about a supposedly Man on the Edge, is what that song is based off of, is Falling Down the movie. You know, of course, with Blaze, falling down, falling down. It's a good movie, really good movie. So Matt and I would go get movies and rent videos and explore what a lot of this stuff was about. So that was one that we enjoyed, and I remember, you know, that's the X Factor. That's part of the X Factor. That's how Maiden affected my life in a way, and this is the album that did that. So there was that. And Visions of the Beast again, Man on the Edge is a music video they have on there, so that was cool to watch that and see that too. It was really neat. But yeah, that's the X Factor in a nutshell. Number 13, Killers. I give Killers an 8 out of 10. I really dig Killers. And this, very similarly to what I said about the X Factor, has grown on me over the years. I liked it. I liked it when I was younger too. Don't get me wrong, because I came from like a punk background. I was really trying to be rebellious, and I came from like punk. I was listening to bands like Green Day and like the Sex Pistols and the Clash, and you know, some popular stuff too, like Blink-182 and those bands. But I really did like Misfits and all those guys too when I was in my like probably 12, 13, 14 years old, around that age, those ages. So Killers had that real quicky, speedy kind of feel to it, which I dug. And I thought was really cool when I first listened to it. Ides of March is a killer track. I used to blast the shit out of that when I was in college. I would just go pull into a parking lot and listen to it. It's a couple, you know, it's a couple minute song, an instrumental, and I would just listen to it before I went to class. Listen to it in between classes. Killers, for me, though, again, never really had that kind of clicking or staying power as some of these other things I'm about to talk to. The Murders in the Rue Morgue song, I really did enjoy that a lot because it had to do with Edgar Allan Poe, and I really liked Edgar Allan Poe. Still like Edgar Allan Poe, like poetry in general. Sitting here right now in 2023 as a Maiden fan, I'm I love the epic stuff. I love the proggy stuff. And like Killers is the farthest from that. It's like not what Iron Maiden is. And this is why Paul leaves to a certain extent. Obviously the drug stuff too and all that bad stuff, but it's not Iron Maiden as we know Iron Maiden nowadays. Bruce Dickinson, you know. and really the six-piece band now with three guitarists and Yannick, Adrian, and Dave, bassist and Steve, drummer and Nico. I mean, that's the band. So with Paul, they did some really great stuff, but Killers for me was a short-lived kind of like fling almost. It was like, this record's awesome. The artwork was really an inspiration for me though. I had a Killers t-shirt, which I still have laying around somewhere. I wore the crap out of that. I love that shirt though, just because of the art. Like classic Eddie Killer shirt. Like that was the foundation. Like the original Iron Maiden Eddie is great, but Killers is like, hey, this is what Eddie's supposed to be. And then it just evolves even more and more after that. So the artwork for Killers, unbelievable. Paul's voice too. For a while there, I got really good at emulating him and singing some of his songs. And I don't have actually a video cover of anything from Killers because I don't think I ever recorded anything. I think I did Wrathchild years and years ago, but I don't have the footage. I can't find it anyway. Yeah, Killers, great, great album. Somebody I used to work with. I used to work at Sam's Club, a grocery store, and one of the guys I work with was a huge metalhead, and his favorite Maiden album was Killers. He was like in the Deano camp. His name was Mike. He was like, I'm all about Deano, man. He's like, I like Bruce too. He's like, but Deano, dude, Killer's amazing. So he was more about the Killers record. Like that was his thing. He liked Killers and the original Iron Maiden album. And I can remember talking to him about them. And he really dug the song Killers. Like that was his thing. Purgatory. In recent years, I've really come to love that song. It's probably one of my favorites from the record, if not my favorite from the record. I just love Paul's vocals on it. I love the Oh, Another Time, Another Place. I love that. I love the guitar that comes in. Dave. I mean, it's Purgatory is a hell of a song. I put that on repeat recently, probably like a year or so ago, and listened to it for like a week straight, every day, back and forth going to work, because I just dug it so much. Like Purgatory, and the artwork for that is amazing too. The half devil face and the half Eddie face. It's so cool. That artwork alone is like the precursor, to Number of the Beast. So really cool artwork, really cool record. Just doesn't have the staying power as some of these other ones coming up. But that's Killers. Number 12, The Final Frontier. I give this one an 8.5 out of 10. Now, for a while, these next three records that I'm going to talk about are kind of interchangeable. And they're all rated 8.5. I'll just get that out of the way now. They're kind of interchangeable, but as I sit here right now and I think about it, I'm putting Final Frontier in the 12 slot just because it's almost like I can see to a certain extent when Somewhere in Time came out after Power Slave why people might have been a little disappointed, because they had this amazing Power Slave World Slavery tour, huge Rhyme of the Ancient Mariner song, Aces High, 2 Minutes to Midnight, all this grandiose spectacle stuff, and then they got Somewhere in Time, which on a smaller scale, right? It's different. It's more futuristic sounding. It's not like metal, right? Metal. You see the clip all the time with Bruce Dickinson when he's talking to that guy in the bar wherever he's at, and he's like, you can't use synthesizers in heavy metal, or you can't play heavy metal with synthesizers, right? And then they use them. So I can see to a certain extent that this was kind of like this might have been how people felt when Somewhere in Time came out after Power Slave, because when the Final Frontier came out after A Matter of Life and Death, I was like, this album is the best thing I've ever heard in my life, right? And then Final Frontier came out, and I was a little disappointed. And then listening to the record too, El Dorado was the first single. I mean, you went from like releasing The Reincarnation of Benjamin Brieg as a single, Different World, and Brighter Than a Thousand Suns to El Dorado. I mean, nothing against El Dorado. I think it's a decent song, but it doesn't compare to those songs, right? It doesn't compare, especially to Benny Brieg and Brighter Than a Thousand Suns. So, like, I was a little let down. I was like, man, we're going back to this Fear of the Dark sounding like stuff, which I'm not really a big fan of. I don't. And then, it grew on me as I listened to the record and it got released and it came out. But this record is just really bottom heavy. It's too light on the top. You get 5 songs in a row that just don't grab you out of the gate. You're getting Satellite 15, The Final Frontier. You get El Dorado. You get Mother of Mercy. You get Coming Home, which is a good song, but it's slower. And then you get The Alchemist, and it's like, where's the epic stuff at? But then at the end, they hit you with Isle of Avalon, The Talisman, Starblind, The Man Who Would Be King, and When the Wild Wind Blows. So, like, you're getting an amazing second half of the record, but this is why I put it in the 12 slot too, because trying to get into this album, it was hard for me. I mean, I listened to it probably 5 or 6 times before I was finally like, oh, yeah, okay. Even then, after I started to really dig into it, like, it still was never as good for me as A Matter of Life and Death. As much as I loved Starblind and Isle of Avalon and The Talisman and When the Wild Wind Blows, The Man Who Be King, like, great songs. But it took me forever to get into that stuff. And it just didn't have, like I said, the staying power. Now, seeing these guys on this tour was awesome because they played a history tour. They didn't really play a lot of stuff from Final Frontier. And maybe if I would have saw some of these songs live, I would have appreciated them more. I would appreciate them more, but I never got to experience that. The only Final Frontier song I've ever seen live is El Dorado. So maybe that's a reason why I don't appreciate it as much. But I mean, I saw the En Vivo DVD, and I think it's awesome. Final Frontier just doesn't have that same like wow factor that I got when I heard A Matter of Life and Death for the first time, or saw the artwork for A Matter of Life and Death, or was just getting into the band. And that's probably a nostalgic thing. It's the first record that came out when I was a fan, so it's probably always going to be there for me. I don't see that really changing. As far as Final Frontier is concerned, some life experiences with it. My brother's a huge fan of this record. He's an aerospace engineer, so he loved this. And he went to Penn State Altoona too, and we actually had a class together. We had a Crusades history class together. And a little bit after that class, semester or two after that, this album came out, and we went to go see the tour together with our friends. And when he eventually had to go up to the main campus, while I stayed at the branch campus to finish my bachelor's. So when he moved up there, I bought him like a copy of the Final Frontier, and he wore it out. And then after we graduated college, right around the same time, like a day apart, I graduated from the branch campus like a day after he graduated from the main campus. He got an offer to move to Florida and start his career. And he's still with that company. He's been doing that now for over a decade. But he said he would wear out on the airplane flights to and from different places for his job, back and forth. He wore out Final Frontier. Listening to Coming Home, he said it really fit the airplane vibe and this whole idea of jet lag and stuff like that. He told me about it. He made this really cool video of our trip to those two shows on the North American leg of the Final Frontier tour that we saw back to back. We stayed at, our friend Matt was in grad school at Slippery Rock, and we stayed at his apartment, and we had a really cool experience. We went to a show in Pittsburgh first, and then went back to Slippery Rock, crashed, and then the next day we went to the show in Cuyahoga Falls, Ohio. Went back and crashed, and then drove home. Really cool experience. He made a video of that whole trip and that sojourn and the places we went on his MacBook back in the day. He burned us all DVDs of it. I have it sitting around somewhere. Really neat memory with the Final Frontier tour and that record. I wrote when I was in college in my last semester, my English 202B class. It was like a creative writing class for the humanities majors. And I wrote a paper about Iron Maiden and the spectacle of it. And it was based around that Final Frontier tour that I had seen with those guys. So I do have experiences with it, and I do like it a lot. When we saw the tour, they dedicated the song Blood Brothers to Ronnie Dio. Ronnie Dio happens to be one of my favorite heavy metal vocalists, one of my favorite performers of all time. Outside of Iron Maiden, he and the stuff that he did with Rainbow, Sabbath, and his solo career is probably, right after Iron Maiden. Everything Iron Maiden, like I said, is, leaps and bounds above everything else, but Dio's right there, right after it. So, really cool to see that, and I love that about the record and dedicating it to Ronnie, and the artwork for it is absolutely stellar. I think it's amazing. Alien Eddie, another Melvin Grant, the guy who did Fear of the Dark. Just a really cool look. Dig Alien Eddie. And never had a t-shirt for this one. never had a T-shirt for Final Frontier. Never really wanted one. It's funny how you kind of gravitate towards things and subconsciously you don't get the stuff that you don't want. I never really had the desire. Maybe there was like a little hidden animosity in there being like, you're not as good as A Matter of Life and Death, so I never went out on a whim to buy a shirt. But still, a lot of really cool experiences with it. Really dug it. And I actually did do a rough cover of a bit of the Talisman here.
Just can't get away from the eye of the storm. The birds outside, a raging storm. We cannot escape it. Bend to earth, we now crave. It's burning leaves from safe, holding on for our dear lives, and we're praying once again. Rotten just joined in. The town is loudest in my head.
But after that, in my number 11 slot is Dance of Death. That record, again, as I mentioned when I was talking about Final Frontier, I give this an 8.5 out of 10. It's on that level with Final Frontier. It's a lot better listenability wise, though. You can, there's a couple of duds here and there, but when you go through the first 5 songs on this album in particular, there's a lot of really good stuff on those first 5. Then there's a couple where you're like, a lull. Then there's amazing songs. One more little lull and then an amazing closer. Death on the Road was the first actual Iron Maiden DVD or concert video that I ever purchased for myself. Matt bought me Rock in Rio in like 2006 or 2007. I bought Death on the Road at a local Circuit City in my town. It's no longer here anymore. Like I said, this place has turned into retail and businesses, right? All these places are going out of business. Thanks, Amazon. And that was the first Iron Maiden concert I ever bought. And I still love it. It's still really good. It's very, very different than Rock in Rio, but it's very cool. I love that Renaissance, castle-y feel to it, that fantasy kind of feel to it, minstrelly kind of feel to it. It's a really cool record, and I dig it. The other Matt I was talking about, who I used to hang out with, my first semester of college, I had a really late math class because from high school to college, I was out of school for about 3.5, 4 years. So I'd take like remedial math classes. And I was in this late math class I had like 1 or 2 days a week. And he would wait upstairs in the computer lab because that's where he worked. He was on campus. So he'd wait for like an extra hour for me to get done with my class. And then I'd give him a ride home because he didn't drive. So on the way home, we would always stop and get pizza somewhere. We used to go to this local Brothers Pizza that was in our town. There used to be a place called the Station Mall we used to go to. Hills used to be there, then Ames. And there's a Brothers Pizza that was really good, and there was this Chinese place called Eastern Express that was amazing. I loved it. And we were in there all the time when I was a kid, and even around this time, like in 2008, we were there. Well, then we stopped going to Brothers for a while, and then we went to this place closer to Matt's house called the Italian Grill. And he lived out like kind of where Benzel's Pretzels, I don't know if you ever heard of it. It's a pretzel place. They make pretzels based in Altoona, Pennsylvania. And he lived a couple blocks away from there. So we would go to this place called the Italian Grill that was right by his house and get pizza. And we would listen to Dance of Death in the car, the song Dance of Death. And he really enjoyed it. Like he was really digging this record at this point in time. So having that experience with him and him digging it, he really liked it. Now, Matt Wagner and I, we really love Passchendaele, and that was our favorite track from the record, and him and I wore that out. I mean, such an amazing song, one of the greatest Maiden songs ever about World War One. Just a really good song. I really got myself into Journeyman, really got into No More Lies, too, actually. I really dig that track. But I did do 2 little rough covers here of Dance of Death, a little clip, and Journeyman. Let's check them out.
Something rushed me from the trees, So when I'm holy place, that is where I fell from grace. And he has cheated us, but that was just a dream. And this is what it means. We are sleeping and we'll dream forevermore. And the fragment remains of the memories, and the shadows remain with our hands. Do you break out to mourn all the colors of the dawn? Will this journeyman's day be his last? I know what I want, and I say what I want, and no one can take it away.
But other than that, with Dance of Death, I never really clung to it as hard as some of these other ones. It was one that was there that I liked a lot of songs off of, but this is kind of where these records are kind of like where I love the majority of the songs on these records. Whereas previously, like when you get to Final Frontier, like I talked about, that's kind of where I'm like, man, the majority of the songs on these records I really dig, and Killers too. But like I said, it's not really what Iron Maiden is. Before that, it's hard for me to say like, oh yeah, I love this record. You know, there's like one or two songs on No Prayer for Your Virtual Eleven and the X Factor that I like, but as a record, I'm not going to say it's my favorite album. Same thing with Killers. Like, the thing with Killers, it's so unique and it's so hard because it's not really Maiden, but there are a lot of songs on it that are really good. They're just not what Maiden is, right? It's not modern Maiden. It's not like 80s Bruce era Maiden. So it's hard for me to be like, I love Killers. Like, it's probably never going to be my favorite album. With that being said, though, Dance of Death and harkening back to Final Frontier a little bit here, those records are the records where I'm kind of like, you know, this is where I'm starting to see like where I am starting to love these epic songs, loving Maiden, loving Passchendaele, loving Journeyman, loving No More Lies, loving Dance of Death, and like I mentioned, those songs from Final Frontier, Isle of Avalon, Talisman, Starblind, When the Wild Wind Blows, Man Who Be King, those songs. That's the stuff that I like. And that all, for me, comes from probably A Matter of Life and Death, which we'll get to. That prog, I love the long stuff. I love the long Maiden songs. I like the short rockers too, don't get me wrong, but the longer stuff is so good. Like, that's what I love about Maiden. But after Dance of Death, my number 10, another 8.5, is the debut record, Iron Maiden. I always loved Phantom of the Opera from like day one. It was never, there was nothing, I always loved Phantom of the Opera, and I always loved Prowler, and I always loved Remember Tomorrow, and I always loved Iron Maiden. Like, those songs are great, and I dig Running Free. I dig the first album. I really do. And Strange World, actually, is one of my favorites from that record. I think it kicks ass. That was one of the first, like, I used to have this really old YouTube channel where I posted me doing these video covers of songs, and I did a Strange World cover in, like, 2000, 2010 or something like that. And I just, man, it's a really strong record. And that's kind of why it's at my number 10 above Dance of Death and Final Frontier, because right now at this very moment, and I've felt this way for, you know, a couple of years now, it's super, super great. I love the original album. Paul Destroys. Phantom of the Opera is one of the greatest Iron Maiden songs of all time. Matt and I have had a lot of talks about the original record. We both really love it. Watching the early days DVD and seeing them like live at the Rainbow and them do Phantom of the Opera and them do some of these songs. Absolutely phenomenal. Loved it. I never had an original Iron Maiden t-shirt, but I did get Matt and you can see it on the banner for the podcast at the top of the YouTube page. There's on the left-hand side, there's me holding a Power Slave Eddie that was drawn and signed and autographed by Derek Riggs, my brother got for me, and then I got Matt his own original Eddie the Head from Iron Maiden, signed by Derek Riggs, and I had him put "Live Long and Prosper" on the when he signed it because Matt's a huge Star Trek fan, so I figured that would be cool for him to have that. And I remember when I gave it to him, we recorded an episode of the podcast, and I don't know if he has it somewhere or whatever, but I mean, he was almost in tears when I handed that to him, and he unwrapped it. Got it for Christmas for him in like 2018 or something like that, years ago. But man, he loved that. So that experience with that, and the reason I got the original Maiden for me, was because he was the guy who introduced me to Maiden. He showed me the band. He was the originator. Without him and I's friendship, without us being friends, without us sharing that similar taste and knowing each other for the longest time, if he never would have introduced me to Maiden, then I don't know where I'd be. I mean, I owe him a lot for that. That's why I got him the original Eddie, because I was like, dude, you're the original guy. You were the guy who got me into Maiden. You're the originator of this part of my life that I love so much right now. You helped me find these guys and discover these guys, so that's why I got him that. So there's a lot of meaning there for that album with me, just because of that. Same thing with the Final Frontier, though, with my brother. You know, those records have a lot of personal meaning. Another thing about the original Iron Maiden record is I just think it's great. It's Derek Riggs' debut. He based the zombie Eddie face off of a head that was hanging from like a Korean era tank or Vietnam era tank or something like that. Korean War era, Vietnam War era tank. And man, it just turned out beautifully. It's the inception of Eddie. Like, it's the creation of Eddie. Is the creation of this band. They play Iron Maiden at every live show. It's just an amazing record. And I have a couple covers that I've experimented with rough over the years. I did, and you'll see them here in a minute. I think I did Running Free, Phantom of the Opera, and the title track, Iron Maiden. So check these out.
Out of money, out of luck, got nowhere on my own. With the gas and here I go. I'm running free, yeah, I'm running free.
But yeah, not much to say about Iron Maiden after that. That's kind of my experience. I really got into this record a couple years ago, in like 2018, when I was on a cruise and I was listening to Maiden records nonstop, and I really dug into this record a lot. Not that I loved it always, but even more so now. I mean, just hearing Paul's rawness and his voice was unbelievable, and I think it's a great album. Definitely in top 10. It has to be. That's why it's number 10. Number 9, Seventh Son of a Seventh Son. I give this record a 9.3 out of 10. This is like the first A level record in my opinion. Like, this is A quality. The rest of the stuff before was like, super high C plus, B minus, a couple of duds, a couple of Fs on there, right? And then like a D. This is the first A record, in my opinion. Like, it's just stellar. Stellar. Now, I will say this about the record. It's not my favorite Bruce era 80s record. I've said this before on my other podcasts. I go, well, you'll see down the line, but I'll just say it right now anyway. My favorite 80s record is probably Power Slave, then Somewhere in Time, then probably Peace of Mind, then Number of the Beast, and then Seventh Son, in that order. They're all amazing, though. Like, they're all A's. But this is the first A record, and my experience with Seventh Son is actually kind of unique. I never really got into this album that much until after I saw the Somewhere Back in Time concert, because that concert was based on Power Slave predominantly, and then bits and pieces of Seventh Son and Somewhere in Time. So I never really digested or really got into this record until after seeing that, because I remember when Davey came out and played Moonchild live, I was like, oh shit. Like, his solo was unbelievable. And that really got me into this record. And Somewhere Back in Time really got me into a lot of the 80s stuff too. Because I was pretty much listening to Power Slave, Number of the Beast, and Peace of Mind from the 80s. And that was pretty much it at that point in time. I kind of ignored, to a certain extent, Seventh Son and Somewhere in Time until I saw Somewhere Back in Time, that tour. But when I saw it, and then Visions of the Beast, like I said, I had that, and I watched the videos, and I saw the Can I Play with Madness video, the Infinite Dreams video, all those really cool videos, and I really dug into this record, and I really love Infinite Dreams. It's probably my favorite song from the album. I actually did a cover of it here, like a brief little clip. Check this out.
Infinite dreams, I can't deny. Infinity is hard to comprehend. I could hear those screams.
Infinite Dreams is my favorite song from the record. I think it's one of the best lyrical songs Iron Maiden has ever done. And it's just so good. I don't have a t-shirt from this record. Another record I don't have a t-shirt from. Matt actually has a Seventh Son cover. Like the Eddie holding the thing in his hand, whatever, that might be the Seventh Son with the umbilical cord, whatever it is. He actually has a shirt, which is awesome, of Seventh Son. I never got one, but he might be a little bit more of a fan of Seventh Son than me, to a certain extent. I got into this album, though. I went through a phase, too, and again, our other friend Matt, when he wrote his final thesis paper for college, we're all history majors. Myself, Matt Wagner, and our other friend Matt, we're all history majors from Penn State, and I wrote my thesis paper on Alexander the Great. Matt wrote his thesis paper on eugenics and eugenic theory, and how it correlated with like prohibition in the 1920s. Brilliant thesis. I mean, I read it. He's a smart dude. Matt's a smart dude. And then our other friend Matt wrote his senior thesis on Aleister Crowley and like his religion of Thelema and all that stuff, which is what Moonchild, the song, is kind of based off of. Aleister Crowley, and there's a little bit of Orson Scott Card and Premonition stuff sprinkled in there too, and Doris Stokes with Clairvoyant and all that, and the occult. So like that was kind of like our other friend Matt's like bread and butter. So our other friend Matt really loves Seventh Son. It's one of his favorite records. When we went and saw Made in England in 2012, it was probably his favorite show he was ever at, and he loved it. And I loved that too. That tour was great, but I mean, I did a podcast about the tours already, so I'm not going to harp on it too much, but amazing. Amazing, amazing, amazing. And Seventh Son was just one of those records that I never really grabbed. My brother and I one time sat down and were listening to Can I Play with Madness over and over and over again. My brother really digs that song. My brother really digs Can I Play with Madness. I happen to think it's one of the weaker songs on the record. I think The Evil That Men Do is a heck of a lot better, but my brother really dug Can I Play with Madness. He was listening to it there for a while, really got into it. He got into Seventh Son too for a little bit, so it's cool how all these albums kind of hit people differently and how we gravitate to them in different ways. So I think that's neat about Iron Maiden. That's why they're such an amazing band. But Seven Son 2, the artwork on the cover, I never had a T-shirt like I said, but in some of these backdrops, these videos, you'll probably see it. I have a fabric poster I used to have hanging in my old bedroom of the clairvoyant Eddie with the devil candle and the angel candle, and he's sitting there with the crystal ball, and that was a really cool backdrop I had. And what my goal was to get every fabric poster that correlated somehow or related to every tour that I'd seen up to that point. So I had like a Live After Death one. I had a uh, Final Frontier poster. I had a Seven Son poster, and then after that, I got a Book of Souls poster because that was the next tour I saw. Never got a Legacy poster. I can still get one, right? But those were what I was trying to do with that. So Seven Son for me, not quite as good as some of these other ones coming up, but I did have a lot of experience with it. I wore this out a lot. I listened to Seven Son of a Seven Son a lot. It became one of my favorite songs. But Infinite Dreams, man, wow, I love that song. And watching the Made in England DVD, I bought that in 2013 when they released it. I love that. I would repeat that song on that DVD over and over and over and over again. I mean, just an amazing song live, an amazing set. And again, like I said, the first A record, the ice sculptures of Eddie, just quality art, just unbelievable, fantastic. Derek Riggs on that one again, just super awesome, and way better than some of the other stuff. I failed to mention Dance of Death's art sucks. It's horrible. David Patchett or whoever it was, crap. Thank you for never working with Maiden again after that. But the rest of the stuff, I mean, just they just killed it. Derek Riggs on the original album too. On this one, some of his best artwork, and the single covers were great. Everything was great about this record. First A album, 9.3 out of 10. Number 8, Brave New World. I give this one a 9.4 out of 10. Man, this record, I've talked about it already a little bit. It's hard to like kind of separate these because they all kind of blend together to a certain extent, but Brave New World, that record, Rock in Rio, just phenomenal. Seeing that show, some of the first songs that Matt ever played for me outside of Flight of Icarus, The Trooper, and like Number of the Beast stuff was Wicker Man, Ghost of the Navigator, Brave New World, those couple songs. The Mercenary. I remember we were going to our local mall. It's called the Logan Valley Mall. It's kind of derelict now. There's like nothing there. There's like no stores or anything, but it used to be a happening place when we were, in our teens and our early 20s. We were pulling in to go to the record store to see if there was anything new, right? Or to go with the Hot Topic to see if there was any new Maiden shirts. That's what we were doing. And we were listening to Mercenary on the way in. And I can remember it was the first time I heard it pulling into the parking lot. And it was like, pay to kill, die to lose. And I was like, it's awesome. What's this about? And he was like, oh, it's about Predator, the movie. And I was like, oh, it's so cool. Him and I saw Predator when we were younger. We ended up going to rent the movie shortly after that. Just getting into the movies and the stuff with the band, it was just amazing. And then watching it with Schwarzenegger. Schwarzenegger is one of our favorite actors, part of our childhood, one of our favorite action heroes. Terminator, Conan, Predator, True Lies, Eraser, Total Recall. The list goes on. He's a great actor, action hero, and this album, song about him. So really cool that experience. I talked about Rock in Rio. My brother loves this record. The artwork for this is amazing. Wicker Man, I remember watching that video on Visions of the Beast. Amazing video. Adrian playing a Les Paul, Black Les Paul, Bruce coming out. Really awesome. Matt and I watching it. I remember Matt used to have this really cool computer set up at his old house he used to live in. And I would go over there a lot, and he would come over to my house a lot. And in his room, we would just sit there on YouTube. Like, this was like the beginning of YouTube, like the early rendition of YouTube. Nothing was like HD, right? It was like really low quality, but we still loved it. We would sit there and just look up Iron Maiden videos or go to their web page and try to find like videos to stream, and it would take 10 times longer than what it is now. We got to click a button and it plays. But we would sit there and wait for it because we were just obsessed, and we'd watch. I remember watching the Wicker Man video over there with him and watching some of these newer videos. Just it was one of the first experiences I had with Maiden outside of listening to those couple songs. And yeah, to this day, Brave New World goes down as one of my favorite records, and that's why it's in the eighth slot. It has to be in my top 10 Iron Maiden records. It's an amazing album. It's my brother's favorite record. I mentioned Rock and Rio now like 5 times. I mean, enough said, right? Rock and Rio, probably the greatest, if not the second greatest after Live After Death thing they've ever done. Um, my experience with this, in college again, Somewhere Back in Time really set the tone for me. Like A Matter of Life and Death, I was obsessed with that record and getting into a lot of the darker stuff. I mentioned this before, like Number of the Beast, the older albums, Killers and Iron Maiden, things that kind of related to that dark, foreboding atmosphere, X Factor a little bit. Um, but when I saw Somewhere Back in Time, it really got me into like Maiden. Like if A Matter of Life and Death got me into the older stuff and the darker stuff, like the early stuff, seeing the Summer Back in Time tour got me into like everything. At that point in time, I wanted to listen to everything. So like 2007, 2008, those 2 years were like the years where I was like, bam, this is where I want to get everything, and really digest everything. So that's when I really started re-listening to albums over and over and over and over again, and really memorizing stuff about the band, like how many songs are on this record, what year did this come out, who wrote this, what's the order of the songs, all that stuff. I mean, I was getting obsessed with them, and it was because of Rock and Rio. It was because of Somewhere Back in Time. It was because of the Brave New World record, and the other records I mentioned too. And we'll get to more, but this record holds a special place in my heart because of Rock and Rio, because Matt bought me that for my birthday one year. My brother loves this album. The experience I had just getting into Maiden, Adrian back. The first record with them is a 6-piece. The artwork with Eddie as a storm in the sky over the futuristic London is really cool. Derek Riggs, I believe, drew that part of it, but it's like a multi-artist sleeve. There's a bunch of people who collaborated on it. Is it one of the strongest? I don't think so, but it's pretty cool. It's different. It's unique, and I do dig it. I think it's cool. So, a lot of experience with Brave New World. I used to, again, in college, I had a Zune, a Microsoft Zune. I put my headphones on, park in an old Martin's grocery store parking lot that used to be on 25th Avenue in Altoona. And I would walk like 6 or 7 blocks through the main gate to the campus because I didn't want to park on campus. And I get some exercise, right? Just listen to Maiden on the way in, and I remember distinctly listening to Not Matter of Life and Death, but Brave New World. One summer I listened to it constantly, or one spring semester I listened to it almost every day. I was obsessed with this record. Brave New World, Thin Line Between Love and Hate I had on repeat. Atlas on Planet I had on repeat. Nomad on repeat. I mean, I love the record. The deeper cuts from the record, I really was getting into it this time, and I really loved it. A lot of experiences with this record, and here's me just playing rough covers of The Wicker Man and The Fallen Angel. Caesar is beside you when he's playing the game. The demons
are inside you and they're making their play. Watch you and they're hiding as they wait for the time. You're difficult to get ready and take over your mind. You only gotta remember what could be done. You only gotta remember I am the only one. You only gotta remember what could be done. You only gotta remember I am the chosen. But it means the emperor. All the things that we change the
Yeah, outside of that, like I said, Brave New World, 9.4 out of 10. It's a great record. Another A from Iron Maiden, another A record, another A album. After that, number 7, The Book of Souls. I give this one a 9.5 out of 10. This record has grown on me immensely. Again, when I first heard it, I wasn't really that into it. But unlike Final Frontier, where it took me, 6, 7, 8 times to actually really get into the record, Book of Souls took me about 2 or 3. And then I really started to grasp it and get into it and gravitate towards it. And I really started to love it. I think it's an amazing album. The artwork is fantastic. The fact that Bruce had cancer and he survived and they released this record and I saw him play this live. Matt and I both saw him play it live. Our other friend Matt was there too, seeing it. It was just amazing. And then the fact that I went to a Mayan temple on that cruise I mentioned previously on this podcast and climbed to the top of it in Quintana Roo and got to look down from the I think it was called the Nolok Toll Pyramid over the jungle in Mexico. I mean, I was actually there at the top of that. Saw the sacrificial stone where they used to bend the people over the back of, rip the people's hearts out, throw their bodies down the staircase. I was there where a Mayan god or a Mayan ruler stood.
Right at the top of the Kilber Ruins, Mexico. Mayan temple. Got the Book Soul shirt on. Sweet. Top of the ruins. So cool. Crazy. The irons.
It was unbelievable. It just added so much to this record for me. I wore the Book of Soul shirt when I was up on that pyramid. I wore the Book of Soul shirt that day when I was in Mexico touring this ancient Mayan city. It was unbelievable. And for me, everything about this record really grew on me. Now, there are some duds on it. Like Man of Sorrows and Tears of a Clown should not belong on this record. They should be nowhere near this record, especially Man of Sorrows. This is bad. But the experience I had personally with this record. Now, this is one of the first records, too, where like Matt and I really weren't hanging out as much as we had been before. I was in grad school, so I was super busy. Like, right after this record came out, then him and I kind of rekindled and hung out a lot more. And we were getting back to hanging out more regularly, playing guitar, hanging out, doing stuff together, going and to different things, renting movies, shooting the stuff. We started doing Iron Maiden like song rankings at this point, like every song from worst to best. This album had a big impact on us for that, and seeing the tour too together was awesome. First tour we saw after 5 years not seeing the band since Made in England in 2012. This record and how much it means to me, it means a lot. On that pyramid in Mexico, about 5 or 6 months prior to that, I had survived DVT, deep vein thrombosis, and I have pulmonary embolism in both of my lungs. And I thought I was going to die. I really did. I went from being in the prime of my life. I mean, I was benching 350, 360 pounds. I was really big dude, really in shape. I was bodybuilding. And then that happened to me, that accident, and I thought I was going to die. I was laying in a hospital bed in the emergency room for almost 3 days. And Matt came over every day. He would come before work and hang out with me for a couple hours. He would come after work and hang out with me for a couple hours. And I mean, he came to see me there. And it was, this record, Maiden brought us together. And then Legacy of the Beast was, coming out. We were talking about going to see shows. Matt was like, dude, you're going to make it. We got to see more Maiden shows. Like, you're going to be all right. Just reassuring me. So this record in particular, Into the Legacy shows, is really special to me. So I really love the Book of Souls, what it means to my own personal life and that chapter of my life. And it's funny how it's called Book of Souls, and I'm saying chapter, right? Really interesting, right? How it correlates. But it's true. It's true. And I love this record for all those things I just mentioned and more. The artwork's amazing. Mark Wilkinson did the cover illustration. You're getting like 5 artworks in one. Matt and I talked about this on the podcast episode about Book of Souls, 2 that we did. The full artwork with the totems with the band's faces in is amazing. It's my favorite artwork. Eddie with the heart in his hand. Eddie with the axe with the backdrop. It's unbelievable. The Great Unknown tapestry that they used live with the shrunken head that Eddie has. It's amazing. Love this album. It's fantastic. Like I said, my own personal experience with it has been unbelievable. And yeah, here are some covers with this record that I did. I did a cover, a really short snippet of The Red and the Black, and a really short snippet of Death or Glory. So check those out.
The Blackjack King and the Rickman Clash. The Artful Dodger, he gets a stash. The Joker's wild like an Empress child. While Madame Fortune, she waits inside. The good luck charm is overkill. The titled soldier says fire at will. Planes overhead go search destroy. The ones below you might decoy. I see the enemy. I know he can't see me. Come back ready to the call. Waiting there for one more storm. Took the bullet in the rain. Inside of the king of pain. Outside you will feel my name. I'll ride up the bridge right lane. I'll watch you spiral down. Dead before you hit the ground. Bullet got you in the back. Flex your shooting beam attack. I shoot the gun in first. I kill to quench my thirst. I broke the weakest breath. It's fire. Tomorrow comes, tomorrow goes, but the cloud remains the same. Wonder why he's feeling down. Tears of a clown. Maybe it's all just for the best. Lay his weary head to rest. Was forever feeling down. Tears of a clown.
Yeah, Book of Souls, 9.5 out of 10. So far, the 3 A albums where we're getting into A category, A tier, right? If I was going to do one of those tier lists. Seven Sun was a 9.3, that's an A. Brave New World, 9.4. And then Book of Souls, 9.5. The next album, number 6, Number of the Beast, 9.5 out of 10. I'm giving this one. Now, some people might say, why is this so low on your list? And I'll probably get criticized. But again, this is my life in Maiden. This is my experience when these records came into my life, how I was introduced to the band, when I heard these songs, where I heard these songs, the people I talked to when I heard these songs, the experiences I had with these albums, with these songs, with these records. So for Number of the Beast, number 6 for me is actually pretty decent. It's pretty solid. Like I said, I got into A Matter of Life and Death. That was the first album where I was like, okay, this is amazing. This is what I love about Iron Maiden. And then I started to kind of go back to these records. But Number of the Beast, for me, is amazing. I mean, I'm giving it a 9.5 out of 10. The artwork was amazing. One of the first t-shirts I ever bought from Iron Maiden was the Run to the Hills t-shirt. And I still have it somewhere. It's like almost 20 years old, probably. But it's an amazing tee. I love it, and some of the coolest artwork I ever saw. Like the cover for this was great. I love the Derek Riggs cover for this. Love the Run of the Hills cover. I love the single cover for Number of the Beast, and everything about this album I dug. I love the Number of the Beast song. I love the Run of the Hills song, classic. I love Children of the Damned. I love all that stuff, and then. The one thing about this record that sticks out to me is after This was before Matter of Life and Death came out. This is probably like 2005. Matt was getting me into, like I said, Peace of Mind. He was getting me into Brave New World. Some of those things. Really, those two records, Peace of Mind and Brave New World, were some of the first I ever really heard. A little bit of this album, a little bit of Number of the Beast. Um, One day he's like, we hung out, we played guitar together, and then I was taking him home. He's like, "Did you ever hear this one?" And I said, "What is it called?" And he said, "Oh, just listen to it." He didn't tell me the name. He wouldn't tell me. I was like, "What is it?" He's like, "Listen, just listen. I'll tell you when it's done." So from my house to his house in the car, it was about a 10, maybe 11, 12-minute drive, right? He started it off. I'm listening to it, and then when Bruce came in and held that note, running low, that part, and then, I mean, man, he's like, "Do you like that?" I was like, "Yeah," after I dropped him off his house. I'm like, "What is it called?" He's like, "It's called Hallowed Be Thy Name." I sat there for another 20 minutes and like told him how much I loved the song, how it was great. Amazing. Why don't you play it for me before? Why'd you wait so long to play it? He's like, "Dude, glad you like it." He's like, "I'll see you later. I'll see you tomorrow. I'll call you." Because we used to hang out all the time. Pretty much like my brother. I mean, basically lived with me. We were together like 3 or 4 days a week hanging out. So I went home and then downloaded all the stuff I could find, right? After I heard How to Do That Name. Everything. Iron Maiden up to that point, which was up to Dance of Death, right? And How I Be That Name was that song for me. It made me get back into the Order stuff. And I can remember downloading the stuff, and it's funny you might think about this. This is like '05, right? Before Matter of Life and Death came out. I went to Rhyme the Ancient Mariner because I was going through all the songs, and I went to Rhyme, and it was like 13 minutes, and I played it for like a minute, and I was like, "Man, I don't want to listen to this for 13 minutes. I don't want to sit here for 13 minutes and listen to it." And I skipped Rhyme the Ancient Mariner. In like '05, I was like, "Man, I don't want to listen to this crap." I was listening to like 22 Acacia Avenue. I was listening to Number of the Beast. I was listening to Run of the Hills. The shorter stuff. I was listening to Waker Man, listening to Wildest Dreams, because I got Dance of Death, like I said. Listen, I got Wasted Years, but I wasn't really into it at that point in time. I like the heavier stuff. I really dug 2 Minutes to Midnight. So that was another song Matt originally played for me too, and we'll get to that. It was 2 minutes. But Number of the Beast for me at the number 6 slot. A lot of memories with this one. It's the album again, and I'm not trying to discount it. It's probably the quintessential heavy metal album. We said this, but it's still not Iron Maiden with the lineup, quote unquote. There's no Nico. Nico's not on this record. Like, I love Clive and what he did for the first 3 albums. Don't get me wrong. He was amazing. Clive Burr, rest in peace. You were the man. Amazing drummer. But this is still not the level of these next couple albums. Nico in the band, and that 5-piece band in the 80s, and now the 6-piece band with Yannick joining as a guitarist, and Adrian Bruce coming back. That's my Iron Maiden. I can't discount the popularity and the power and the foundation that this album set for all heavy metal and metal music in general. But on the same token, for me personally, it's just not my favorite album. This could be your favorite album of all time from Iron Maiden, and I would never argue with you because I understand the power it has. I understand what it brought to the table. I understand the influence that it created for so many bands, and honestly, the Iron Maiden themselves. This album set the tone, right, for them to create even better stuff, in my opinion, down the road. Isn't a hell of an album. It's an amazing album. It has that same feel, though. It has that same like raw feel that Iron Maiden has, like the original album with Paul. For me, it has that same rawness to it, and I love that about it. On the other side of the coin, it doesn't have that proggy edge that I really want to see from these later albums. It has it. It has it a little bit. It's there. It's there. That proggy edge that Maiden had has always been there. I mean, you can see that with Phantom of the Opera from the first record and a lot of their songs. Remember Tomorrow, Strange World. Not so much on Killers, but on this, Hallowed Be Thy Name, Number of the Beast, 22 Acacia Avenue, Total Eclipse. There is a proggy feel, Children of the Damned. But it just gets expanded upon and implemented and pushed even further forward in the stuff after this record. But this is definitely the blueprint. This definitely sets the tone for where they're going to go and expand further. But this is the height of that horror-themed ideology that they had, that occult-themed ideology from the first two records. And in a way, for me, that's kind of where it's limited to. It doesn't expand like Peace of Mind does. It doesn't have that same kind of scope, that grandiose scope where Matt and I talk about this all the time on the podcast. Some of these albums, these albums have become thematic. And it's true. So, from Number of the Beast, check out this bass cover I did of Run to the Hills. Yeah, after that, when I talk about scope and being grandiose and going above and beyond and moving forward even further, that brings me to the number 5 album. These are my top 5. This is top 5 albums for me from Iron Maiden. Number 5 for me is Peace of Mind. Giving this one a 9.6 out of 10. Now, do I think the Peace of Mind cover artwork is as good as Number of the Beast? No, I don't. I think Derek Riggs destroyed it with Number of the Beast. And I think he destroyed it with Peace of Mind too. But I don't think it's quite as good as the cover art for Number of the Beast, right? But the single cover for the Trooper, you can't deny how amazing that is. I love Flight of Icarus, that cover too. But the Trooper, that piece of art is probably one of the most iconic. It's probably up there with the actual Number of the Beast cover art as being one of the most iconic pieces of Iron Maiden history or art ever. Matt has said this, and I'll say this too. If you were to get a casual person in Iron Maiden, one of the first pieces of art that you're probably going to show them is the Trooper. And this is the song, really, that honestly created my life in Maiden, because if Matt wouldn't have discovered this song and wouldn't have seen that artwork down the line and got infatuated with it, who knows where I would be right now? Who knows where my trajectory and my life in Maiden would have turned out? My life in Maiden might not have even existed. So, the Trooper is very important to me. Kind of like vicariously through Matt, right? Living through his experience with that vicariously. But without that, I wouldn't have what I have. I wouldn't have my life in Maiden. He wouldn't have his life in Maiden. So very, very important record and important album for us. So, but Peace of Mind as a whole, like I said, the scope is just a little bit more grandiose. They push the boundaries more than they did on Number of the Beast. You got Nico, first of all, who comes in and starts destroying with his drums. You have the amazing To Tame a Land, which is based on one of the greatest science fiction novels ever, in Dune. And just songs about things that Matt and I are passionate about. Music, movies, history, all those kind of things, mythology. It's all mixed into this record. And then again, we'll see later, they push this even further down the road. The song Revelations, for me, is an amazing song. Now, the first song I ever heard from this album, the first Iron Maiden song I ever heard, period, was Flight of Icarus. Matt played that for me because he knew I liked Greek mythology and Greek culture. And to this day, that always is going to hold a special place in my heart. And I remember watching the music video for it, Fly on Your Wing Like an Eagle, with Nico's face painted blue and all that stuff. Watching it on YouTube with Matt, and then later on Visions of the Beast when they released a compilation. It's just an amazing record. Matt, I remember he used to come over to my house, and he was a little bit more advanced than me in guitar at that point in time. He had learned to play like riffs and melodies. I was still like focusing on chords and things. I was still like a fledgling, and he was getting more like into the intermediate level, right? And he was playing like the parts of the Trooper, like the like the hammer-ons and pull-offs. And I was like, I'm never gonna be able to do hammer-ons and pull-offs, right? And he was just doing that part. One of the first songs he ever learned how to play in full was the Trooper. And he learned Davey solo and everything. I mean, it took him a while, but he got it down, and he was great at it. I give him credit. Like, I have that experience in the back of my mind, him playing that song. And one of his favorites. We used to be in a bowling league together too, Matt and I, and a couple of our other friends. And we would go to, my brother was in it for a while, and our other friend named Jeremy, he was in a league with me, Matt Wagner, our other friend Matt, my brother, and our friend Jeremy. We would go bowling, and Matt always used to wear a Master Puppets Metallica t-shirt, and he wore the Trooper Iron Maiden hoodie, and like those were his things. Trooper was like his first thing ever, and it was to this day. And he talks about it on the podcast, like it's his thing. Peace of Mind is his favorite album. Davey's his favorite guitarist, and honestly, this album is ranked that high for me too because it reminds me of Matt. Like it reminds me of his love for this album, and without his love for this album and for this band, and hearing Trooper and introducing me to Flight of Icarus, I never would have probably been a fan. So I owe him a lot. I also bought a Peace of Mind shirt on the front with the album cover, and then on the back it had the World Peace Tour dates with Eddie like pulling the world apart, ripping it up, like taking pieces out of it. That was another one of the T-shirts I had from this album, and I love this record. So many experiences with this. Legacy of the Beast, 2019 dates that I saw with Matt, and our other friend Jeremy went to the Pittsburgh show with us. First time he saw Maiden, he was blown away. He was like, best concert I've ever seen. He actually went and bought a Yamaha Pacifica guitar after he saw Maiden. Jeremy did, because he was like, I want to play guitar now after seeing these guys. It's amazing. He went and bought a guitar after seeing them. Like, that's the power of this band. Like, Matt and I experienced that years before him, right? In like 2004, 2005. He never saw them. He saw them in 2019 and he went and bought a guitar. I mean, the power they have is amazing. And that's another thing about Legacy of the Beast. It was a Peace of Mind heavy set. I said this on a couple podcasts ago. Peace of Mind heavy set, and seeing Where Eagles Dare, Flight of Icarus, The Trooper, and Revelations was absolutely unbelievable. This record means so much to me, and why it gets a 9.6 out of 10. Here's a couple snippets I did. Couple second clip of Revelations, and a little bit of me playing bass along to The Trooper. Check these out.
Got everything down to about down, hear a cry. Our room was flooded, our people drifting down. The walls of golden shores.
You'll take my life, but I'll take yours too. You fire musket, but I'll run you through. So when you're waiting for the next attack, you better stand, there's no turning back.
Next, number 4, Somewhere in Time, 9.7 out of 10. This is my most relatable album. Why? Because it's about science fiction, it's about history, it's about life. It's by guitarist Adrian Smith's probably best album he's done, like in terms of writing credits and his solos. You know, 2 of his best solos are on this record, in Stranger in a Strange Land and Wasted Years. He wrote Sea of Madness, he wrote Stranger in a Strange Land, he wrote Wasted Years. This is his record, and my playing is emulated after him. And this album means so much to me. After I saw Somewhere Back in Time, I really jumped into this record. I listened to bits and pieces of it here and there, but I wasn't really into it until after I saw Somewhere Back in Time. I was dating a girl who lived in State College, which is about 45 minutes from Altoona, and I remember going to a mall down there, the Nittany Mall, and I walked into a Hot Topic, and I told the story before on one of the podcast episodes. This guy was wearing a Wasted Years or a Somewhere in Time T-shirt, and I talked to him, and he said his favorite record was Somewhere in Time. His favorite song from it was Wasted Years, and at that point in time, I was more in like I liked A Matter of Life and Death, and I liked like some of the Number of the Beast, Peace of Mindy stuff, and Brave New World. I wasn't really into that, but I had a discourse with him, and we talked, and I was like, oh, that's cool. And it made me think. And I listened to a little bit here. I listened to Wasted Years. I listened to a couple songs. And I liked them, but I was into like the more proggy, reunion-y stuff at that point. And some of the stuff, like I said, the darker stuff, like Number of the Beast and those things. wasn't until I saw a Somewhere Back in Time concert that I was like, man, this is awesome. And that's when I really got into Somewhere in Time. And that's really when it became my most relatable album. Because I always loved mythology. Again, Matt showed me Flight of Icarus. So Alexander the Great, getting into that song and digesting it, I loved it. Loved it when I actually sit down and gave it a chance and listened to it. After seeing Somewhere Back in Time, Matt and I used to work out together, play guitar together. We were together constantly, like brothers pretty much. And him and I went jogging back at Penn State's track, Penn State Altoona, the campus we graduated from. We went back. I was still in college. He had graduated. We were running around the track listening to Loneliness of a Long Distance Runner. I mean, that is amazing to me. Exercising while you're listening to The Loneliness of a Long Distance Runner by Iron Maiden from the Somewhere in Time record was amazing. Heaven Can Wait really grew on both him and I after we saw it live on Somewhere Back in Time. Caught Somewhere in Time was always one of my favorites. I dug that. Wasted Years too. Sea of Madness I always liked. The record really grew on me after Somewhere Back in Time. And even now, even more so with the Future Past tour out, I can't wait to see that show because this is my most relatable album. My senior thesis paper for undergrad and in grad school, I amended it and expanded it on Alexander the Great. And I love him. He's my favorite historical figure. And the fact that this record has that and that they're playing it now on the Future Past tour is unbelievable to me. Another reason why this record became so powerful to me and so cool to me is the cover sleeve and the artwork I always loved. But watching Blade Runner then for like the first time when I was in college in like 2008, 2009, going to renting movies again. What are this, me, Matt, and our friends going to the video store, we rented Blade Runner and watched it with Harrison Ford. And then you watch it and you're like, oh, that's what this album cover is actually based on. I get it now. Just little pieces of that about your life. The fact that the walk on Eddie for Somewhere Back in Time, the first time I ever saw Maiden was Cyborg Eddie. I mean, that plays into your subconscious. Cyborg Eddie is my favorite Eddie now. It's him and Pharaoh / Mummy Eddie from Power Slave. They'll always be my favorite. Doesn't matter what Maiden does down the line, right? There's a lot of new stuff they've done that I love too, and it's on the top of my list. But Pharaoh, Mummy Eddie, and Cyborg Eddie will always be my favorite. Nothing's going to come close to those guys. But this record has so much substance and so much emotion. And it relates to me the most because it reminds me of what I would write if I was in a metal band. If I could write any Maiden album or churn out how I feel in my heart and in my head and in my soul, it would probably be something very similar to Somewhere in Time and probably Power Slave. And if you're talking about reunion stuff, probably A Matter of Life and Death, and then probably Honestly Truly Now Senjutsu. The first Iron Maiden shirt I bought at a show I went to, the first show, I bought the Somewhere Back in Time cover art with Eddie on it, and then on the back it had like the spaceship with the gun pointed up, and then the list of all the tour dates, almost like Somewhere on Tour was for Somewhere Back in Time. And Matt bought a t-shirt there too, and the front of his was Aces High Eddie, and the back was 2 Minutes to Midnight. Really cool shirt. There's a lot of love I have for this album, and really Somewhere Back in Time, because again, without me seeing that tour, who knows what would have happened. But I love it. Love this record. Love this album. Here's some short snippets and covers of me playing Wasted Years and Caught Somewhere in Time. Check them out.
Coast to go across the seven seas, travel far and wide. Now it seems I'm just a stranger to myself. I know the things I sometimes do. It isn't me but someone else. Closing my eyes, and I think of home. Another city goes by, and take away from me, sheep's moving, try to hide. inside your deepest sins, all the things that you've done wrong, and I know where you belong. Time is always on my side. Time is always on my side. God, somewhere in time. God, somewhere in time. God, somewhere in time. Whoa.
Now we come to the final three. Number 3, Senjutsu. 10 out of 10. I have to give this record a 10 out of 10. Some people might say, what are you doing? 10 out of 10? How's this better than Somewhere in Time? How's this better than Peace of Mind? How's this better than Number of the Beast? How's this better than Brave New World and Seventh Son? What's wrong with you? Well, for me it is. Just because of the experience, like I said, I had with the record and how it fits into my life personally. Everybody's is different. Everybody's is different. But for me, this record, I know it's the latest one. The 6-year wait after COVID, after not seeing the band since 2019 on the Legacy of the Beast tour, the anticipation. Again, I want to hint this. The gap between A Matter of Life and Death and Final Frontier was only 4 years. When that album came out and I listened to it, I wasn't that impressed at first. It took me several times to get into that record. And I still don't think it was as good as A Matter of Life and Death. I don't think it comes close to it, right? Senjutsu, that 6-year wait between Book of Souls and Senjutsu the record was absolutely worth it. Now I will say this: when I first heard Writing on the Wall, I was like, man, I don't really. It's good. Like, I actually liked it. I liked it better than El Dorado when I heard it, or Speed of Light when I heard Book of Souls singles. But I liked Writing on the Wall. I just didn't think it fit the samurai motif. Whereas those other songs, Speed of Light and El Dorado, I thought they were okay songs. I didn't think they were great. Writing on the Wall I thought was a great song. I was just let down because it wasn't about samurai or feudal Japan or whatever the cover was about, right? Samurai Eddie was about. But then when they released Vertigo and I heard that, I was like, okay, this is awesome. And then after that, when they released the album a couple months later, it was unbelievable. When I first heard Senjutsu and that opening, in the Stratego, in the Writing on the Wall, Lost in a Lost World blew me away. I could go on about this record forever. And I said this in the Senjutsu episode that I did. Death of the Celts, The Parchment, and Hell on Earth. The Parchment is one of my favorite Iron Maiden songs of all time. Like, it's up there for me. It's one of my favorite Iron Maiden songs ever. And the fact that this album has songs that have become my favorite Iron Maiden songs, and it's the newest thing, is just mind-blowing to me. The artwork is amazing. Again, Mark Wilkinson with Samurai Eddie is amazing. The stuff on the inside, the full spread of the Japanese battlefield with the Japanese shrines in the background and the dead bodies laying around. Like, it's a war-ravaged field with these different banners or family flags or clan flags for these feudal Japanese armies or samurais fighting against one another is beautiful. The artwork with Eddie with the arrows and Eddie with the dagger and Eddie with the sword and the snake with the Japanese symbol and the decorative helmet for like the Stratego single cover for a lot of different songs, just different color variations with the calligraphy writing. Beautiful. It's amazing. With Book of Souls and with Senjutsu, those two albums for the reunion are some of the best artwork since the 80s stuff, since like Seventh Son back to Number of the Beast. Some of the most classic artwork I've ever seen. Not so much Final Frontier, not so much Dance of Death, and not so much Brave New World. Matter of Life and Death, too, is amazing, but still not quite as good. I'll say this, not quite as good as Senjutsu. Senjutsu's artwork is amazing. I mean, top of the line, top shelf art, up there with Book of Souls, up there with Power Slave, up there with Somewhere in Time, Seventh Son, Peace of Mind, Number of the Beast. It's that good. It's really that good. And this record for me, just hearing these songs and the Parchment, the part In a Tempest Never Shaken, Edge of Doom is Not Mistaken, that whole part, some of the best lyrics Maiden have ever done, as far as I'm concerned. This record came out in a time where the podcast was on a hiatus. Matt got married in 2020, so him and I haven't really been hanging out as frequently as we used to. We talk from time to time, but like he's a busy man. Like his life is just, he has kids now. His life is just busy, and I get it. So this is why I'm doing this as I'm doing it. There's no animosity or hatred between him and I. We're friends, we care about each other. But it's not the same. We can't do what we used to do. Like we were recording podcast episodes once a week, hanging out with each other once or twice a week, a couple years ago. We can't do that now. But this album got us talking again. We were talking about Senjutsu together. We ranked the songs together. We talked about the songs together. We talked about the art. Matt sent me a picture of him. He bought a vinyl for it, a vinyl for Senjutsu for his record player that I got him for Christmas, 4 or 5 years previously. Just so much awesome stuff about Senjutsu and so much awesome stuff about this record. It's up there. It takes me back to A Matter of Life and Death. And from A Matter of Life and Death, that just, listen to Doty's Perfect. There's not a bad song on the album. Like, there's no blemishes on it. It's just rock solid from beginning to end. Senjutsu is one of those records. Senjutsu is one of the best records they've done in their entire career. It's one of the best records since the reunion in 1999. It is an amazing record, and I've had so much love and joy with this record. Like I said, I have a couple covers I did, and I'm actually really proud of these because I've become a more efficient guitar player as I've gotten older, and I bought several guitars in recent years, and you'll see in some of these videos I got a green Stratocaster. Why did I get that green Strat? That color? Well, I know it's not Adrian Smith's signature Jackson because I'm not Adrian Smith, but I wanted to be like Adrian. He's my favorite guitarist in the band, so I got a green. Green's my favorite color. So I got a green Fender Stratocaster to play Iron Maiden songs on because I wanted to feel like Adrian, right? And I wanted to be myself too. So it's not his signature. It's me, but it's also influenced by Adrian. So here's my covers of Stratego, The Parchment, and then Hell on Earth.
Are you ready?
So yeah, I mean, nothing else really to say about Senjutsu. I got a friend from working to it. It's like her favorite record. She loves Death of the Celts. She liked Lost in a Lost World. This band is so great, and going back through all this stuff too. Like I remember when I was in college, I got friends I worked with into the Final Frontier. I got some friends I work with into A Matter of Life and Death. I got some friends I work with into some of the Order stuff. I mean, a lot of the stuff. I got my brother into Maiden by Rock and Rio and Brave New World, that record, Final Frontier. Huge influence from this band. But Senjutsu, definitely 10 out of 10. And there's only two more records, and they're going to be both 10s out of 10s too. And number two for me is A Matter of Life and Death, 10 out of 10. This record changed my life. This record made me a Maiden fan. It made me a metalhead. It made me appreciate heavy music. It is the record that to this day I've probably listened to the most. I probably listened to this record the most, even more so than Senjutsu. Matter of Life and Death. I had a cassette deck. I had a 2000 Hyundai Elantra. I had a tape deck and a cassette deck. Didn't have a CD player. I recorded this entire album on a cassette deck and listened to it back and forth, going back and forth to state college and going back and forth to work. Because I was dating somebody down there at the time, 45 minutes. I listened to it in the parking lot for another 20 minutes or 25 minutes until it was over. And then I would go in. I would go to work and listen to it on my break. I would go out for my lunch for a half hour and listen to a couple songs, come back in, go out, listen to the rest of the album on the way home. Like, Matt and I would cruise around our city and listen to it all the time. Like, it's that good. It is that good. It's that good of a record. And I absolutely love it. Absolutely love it. It is a perfect 10 out of 10. I remember again going to the mall with Matt to check out some stuff, T-shirts, going to see if there was any guitar stuff at our local guitar store, Music Emporium, to get picks or a guitar strap or strings or whatever, and listening to this record on and off, driving out to friends' places who lived in, towns that were close, like Hollidaysburg or Duncansville or Bellwood or Greenwood or just around people we used to associate with and hang out with, Juniata and Altoona and like Blair County, right, where we live. We would wear the crap out of this album, listen to it in its entirety. I remember listening to The Pilgrim, and Matt really digging it in the mall parking lot. We sat there before we walked into the mall and listened to the entire song. I remember listening to Burning a Thousand Suns in the car until we walked into the mall, like the Reincarnation of Benjamin Brigg. I remember listening to The Legacy with him, hanging out with our friends playing volleyball or something over the summer. Then we put Legacy on, and we listened to Legacy, and then the album started over, and we listened to like the beginning of Different World or End of These Colors Don't Run before we went and did our next thing. We jammed or did whatever. One of the first Maiden shirts I got outside of those two I mentioned, the Run of the Hill shirt and the World Peace Tour Peace of Mind shirt, was the Reincarnation of Benjamin Brigg. It was the first shirt I got when I actually started really wanting to play guitar. Epiphone or Gibson SG copy that I had. My dad bought it for me for my birthday or something. He got it at Circuit City in State College, and I had that guitar through a really crappy amp. There used to be this discount store, secondhand store, junk store in town called Crazy Hazy's. They had a lot of stuff. They had a lot of really decent shit for what you would actually, need, and it was cheap. My dad bought me a really cheap Fender amp, like a 25-watt cheap Fender amp, and I had that guitar, and man, I played the crap out of it. I learned how to play some of my first music on that amp and that guitar. And then eventually in 2007, I bought my Jackson Warrior, which I still have to this day. I'll never get rid of it. Again, influenced by Adrian Smith, a red Jackson WRX-TX Warrior and transparent red finish. I named it Persephone. I named all my guitars after Greek gods and goddesses. I'll post a picture of my guitars up here. They're all influenced by a lot of different people, predominantly Adrian Smith, Dave Murray, and Yannick Gears from Iron Maiden. A lot of other influences too, like Tony Iommi from Sabbath, guys like that. This record changed my life. This is the album, and I had so many experiences with this. Legacy. Me and Wagner went and rented the movie Jacob's Ladder at a local family video store that used to be here because somebody in a Reddit or some kind of forum said that the Legacy was about Jacob's Ladder, the movie, so I rented it. Just all this stuff. We rented The Duelist from Power Slave, which obviously there's only one album left, right? Talk about that in a minute. A lot of movies and a lot of cinema came out. And I just want to hit the nail on the head here again with Somewhere Back in Time. 2008 was a great year for us as people in general. I had started college. Matt graduated college. We saw Iron Maiden on the Somewhere Back in Time tour. The early 2000s, like 2000 up to 2008, and even beyond that, like 2010, were just great. That was a great decade. Lord of the Rings is my favorite fantasy novel of all time. I mean, it's great. The Fellowship of the Ring, The Two Towers, Return of the King. Matt never was really into it that much. I got him into that. Those movies came out 2001, 2002, 2003. Amazing. 2004 and 2005, Matt got me into Maiden. We were listening to music together, getting into heavy metal together. I'm a huge Batman fan. I've been reading Batman comics since I was a 5-year-old boy in the 1990s, like the early 90s. Batman Begins came out in 2005. Amazing movie. Getting into metal. All my stuff that I loved came back, right? It was like I was re-experiencing my childhood over again and discovering new stuff too as my studies in college, history, reliving that, expanding upon that. Comic book that I love were coming back. Lord of the Rings, because I saw the animated Rankin Bass Hobbit movie and the Lord of the Rings Ralph Bakshi and the Return of the King Rankin Bass movie. Everything was coming back full circle. And then in 2008, we saw Somewhere Back in Time. We saw The Dark Knight by Christopher Nolan, directed that. One of the greatest Batman movies or crime movies in general, crime thriller. Just life was at an all-time high. And it was because of Somewhere Back in Time, and it was because of albums like A Matter of Life and Death that just really push you forward to be a more intelligent person, a more learned person, to explore, to expand, to like investigate, to find clues. That's what I'm a historian. Like I said, that's what historians do, right? I also work in law enforcement and local government. That's what detectives do. That's what we do. So to have this added to my life was just immense. And it really changed my life and made me the person I am today. Truly, truly. This record and the experience I had with this, I could do a podcast just about this record. An episode or 2 or 10 or 100 about this record alone. It is that special to me. It holds a very, very special place in my heart as one of the greatest records I've ever heard in my life. And My Life in Maiden, this was the start of that. Even though I listened to some of that earlier stuff, this is what plunged me into the depths of Maiden. And then this next record, after you watch this Different World cover that I did, check this out real quick. The number one record, Power Slave, another 10 out of 10, perfect 10. Again, harkening back to Somewhere Back in Time and the experience I had with that tour and how amazing it was. It's because of this record, Power Slave. It's because of Aces High, 2 Minutes to Midnight, Power Slave, and Rhyme of the Ancient Mariner. Those 4 songs in particular. I love the rest of the record too. Like I said, Matt and I went and rented The Duelist together and watched it. Just everything about this. The Samuel Taylor Coleridge poem. I had an English poetry class that was based on Victorian era literature. And I remember my teacher, my professor, who's actually a really good friend of mine, helped me a lot in my later years of my life. she was saying something about Rhyme of Ancient Mariner. She's like, anybody know what that's from? And I said, that's Rhyme of Ancient Mariner. She said, how'd you know that? And I said, did you listen to Iron Maiden? She said, no. I said, well, they have a song called Rhyme of Ancient Mariner. Like, she was blown away. Like, she had no idea that, like, some kid who was I don't know, I was a freshman in college, right? I was a little older than some of the other kids, though, because I started college till I was 21. How did you know that? And I was like, well, I'm a big heavy metal guy. And then she was like, wow. And she used that in future lectures, which was awesome. The tour shirt that came out for that, too. Man, that Around the Ancient Mariner tour shirt. I love that shirt. That artwork was so cool. This record is just as important to me as A Matter of Life and Death, and this is why I want to say it's okay to be a fan of the 80s and it's okay to be a fan of the reunion stuff. You can like both of the eras of Maiden, because my two favorite records, my two most influential records who made me the person I am today, and if you throw Senjutsu in there, and then after that Somewhere in Time, it's like it's anthem. It's like old, new, old, new. They're the records that really influence me as a person, as a human being. And man, Power Slave. Some of the first songs besides the Number of the Beast stuff that Matt played for me, the Peace of Mind stuff Matt played for me, and the Brave New World stuff Matt played for me, were Aces High and 2 Minutes to Midnight, these short rockers. Like I said, subconsciously you don't really know, but then you go see the live show and you're like, damn, wow. But in February of 2008, I went to Hot Topic again in the Logan Valley Mall in Altoona, and I bought Live After Death. They released a DVD, and I watched that concert over and over and over again for about 3 or 4 weeks, about a month, until we went to go see Somewhere Back in Time. And that's when Power Slave, at that point in time, became my favorite record. That's when I loved Mum Yeti the most. That's when Rhyme became my favorite song. That's when I was answering questions in English class about the song, right, in San Mateo Coleridge. That's when I went to the tour and saw it live, and it's on the Flight 666 DVD, immortalized forever, that experience. That, Live After Death, and then actually going to see Somewhere Back in Time is why this is up there too. Because this was the live show that got me into Maiden the most, and it was based on the Power Slave record. And then before that, the album, the music that came out that got me into the band the most was Matter of Life and Death. That's where I am with Iron Maiden. Power Slave, everything about it, the Pharaoh artwork, like I said, everything, the single covers, Aces High, 2 Minutes to Midnight, the World Slavery Tour poster with Eddie and the Shackles and the Lightning, and the Live After Death tour poster with him coming up out of the grave, and that concert and everything about it, the stage set, everything. I mean, if it wasn't for Power Slave, it wasn't for Live After Death, it wasn't for Somewhere Back in Time, for the modern day fans like myself who got into the band later, it's hard to say where I would be as a fan or where modern day Maiden fans would be as a fan. They did the right thing by picking the 2008 tour to focus on Power Slave and give a Live After Death, because it just reinvigorated everybody again. Hell, it's hard for me to believe that it's been 15 years since I sold their shows, but it has been that long. It's crazy to think about that. But that, for the last 15 years, I've been obsessed with Iron Maiden still. And it's because of that show. They did the right thing. And they're always doing the right thing. They're always hitting it home. And sadly, I don't have any Power Slave covers of me playing stuff on guitar, which is crazy because it's like my number one album, right? I did have Flash of the Blade somewhere. I did have a little bit of Rhyme somewhere and a little bit of 2 Minutes somewhere, but I don't know what I did with them. Oh, and Power Slave too. I don't know what I did with the clips. I don't have them saved anywhere. I looked for them when I was trying to prep for this video and make it, but I can't find them anywhere, so I don't know where they went. I gotta say, this has been super fun to do. I never had a Power Slave shirt either. I had a Live After Death shirt, and I had a Somewhere Back in Time tour shirt, but I never had a Power Slave shirt. I had a couple Legacy of the Beast tour shirts too. Enough of the shirts. I bought a steel plate like banner for Power Slave. I used to have hanging on my old bedroom door with it had Mummy Yeti on it, and that was like one of the first pieces of memorabilia besides t-shirts I bought that had anything to do with Iron Maiden. Power Slave, the record, was the first Iron Maiden CD I actually ever bought. I actually bought that in Somewhere in Time. And I bought Matter of Life and Death around that time too, those three. But it was right after Somewhere Back in Time when I bought the stuff, when I actually really got into the stuff. Matt let me borrow a copy of his Matter of Life and Death CD, and I just, like I said, recorded it on tape and put it in my tape deck. So a lot of the stuff, Matt would just let me borrow copies of it, and I would either record it on a tape deck or I'd burn it on a CD or something. Then I went out and I bought everything. In like 2007, 2008, I bought everything from Maiden. Everything I could get my hands on, every single thing. And that's why they're my favorite band. And that's why this has been my life in Maiden. This is what it's about. This is about expressing. And they're more than a band, like I said to me. I went through every album and gave you little bits and pieces. And I'm sure I left some stuff out of there that I probably don't even remember. But to the best of my knowledge at this point in time right now, that's what I can remember. And that's what this podcast is about. This is the life part of it. This is the life part of Maiden. And I'm so grateful to be a Maiden fan to this day. I can't wait to see the Future Past tour. And I hope my prediction's right, like I gave in the last one, that they do a new album in 2025. Whether they combine it with the 25th anniversary of Brave New World tour, who knows? But we'll see. 50th anniversary of Maiden, 25th anniversary of Brave New World. It could be awesome. Whatever they do, I'm sure it'll be amazing. But this has been Joe Labriola from Matter of Life and Maiden, the podcast of the Beast. Everybody take care of yourselves out there. Up the irons. Go see Iron Maiden. Go listen to the older stuff. Go through the 80s catalog, the reunion catalog. They are equally awesome. They are equally awesome. I have to say. They're on par with one another. 80s is more classic, obviously, but the new stuff is damn near as good. Some of it is actually better than some of the 80s stuff, in my opinion. It's just Iron Maiden, the band themselves. 17 studio albums deep. Some of them not that great. Most of them excellent. Please, just get into this band, love this band. Where to start if you're a fan? I would say start with like Peace of Mind, Brave New World, because that's how I got into them. Because those albums are the ones that are probably the most well-rounded. There's a little bit of stuff on there for everyone. And a lot of other albums are like that too. But that's probably where I'd start. Peace of Mind, Brave New World kind of stuff. Because you're going to get a little bit of the 80s with Peace of Mind. You're going to get a little bit of the modern day stuff with Brave New World. And then you can go from there and go pick and choose what you want to listen to. So that's where I recommend starting. Anyway, everybody take care of yourselves. Have a great one. Thanks for the support. Thanks for listening to A Matter of Life and Maiden, the podcast of the Beast. Take care.